Story 1 comes from Marcus Thompson, Denver, Colorado. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to meet someone online. I was always pretty traditional about dating. Meet someone through friends, at a bar, maybe at work. But after my divorce 3 years ago, my buddy convinced me to try one of those dating apps. "Everyone's doing it now, Marcus," he said. "It's 2021, man. Get with the times." So I downloaded the app, set up a profile, and started swiping. Most of the conversations went nowhere, but then I matched with someone named Sarah. Her profile seemed normal enough. Blonde hair, bright smile, worked as a dental hygienist. We chatted for about 2 weeks, and she seemed great. Funny, smart, easy to talk to. She suggested we meet up at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, and I agreed. The day of our date, I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early. I'm punctual like that, always have been. I ordered a black coffee and sat near the window, watching people walk by on Colfax Avenue. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah, running a few minutes late. "Be there soon." "No problem." I sipped my coffee and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. I sent her a message asking if everything was okay. No response. I felt that familiar sting of being stood up, something I hadn't experienced since high school. I was about to leave when my phone rang. Unknown numbers. "Hello." Marcus, a woman's voice, but it didn't sound like Sarah from our video chats. "Yeah, who's this?" "This is Detective Lisa Ramirez with the Denver Police Department. I need to ask you some questions about your communications with a person using the name Sarah Mitchell." My stomach dropped. "What? Is she okay?" "Sir, there is no Sarah Mitchell. Can you tell me where you are right now?" I gave her the address of the coffee shop, and she told me to stay put. Within 15 minutes, 2 detectives arrived. Detective Ramirez was a stern-looking woman in her 40s, and her partner, Detective Chen, was younger, maybe early 30s. They sat across from me in the corner booth, away from other customers. "Mr. Thompson," Detective Ramirez began, pulling out a tablet. "How long have you been communicating with this Sarah Mitchell?" "About 2 weeks. We matched on a dating app." "What's going on?" Detective Chen leaned forward. "We've been tracking a person who's been using multiple fake profiles to target men in the Denver metro area. The profile you've been communicating with, we believe it's the same person." "Target? What do you mean target?" Detective Ramirez showed me her tablet. On it were photos of 3 different men. "Do you recognize any of these people?" I shook my head. These 3 men all went on dates with someone they met online in the past 6 months. They all matched with profiles using different names and photos. Each man was lured to a specific location and robbed. 2 of them were drugged. 1 ended up in the hospital. My hands started shaking. Jesus Christ. "Mr. Thompson, you're lucky you contacted us when you did. We've been monitoring several fake profiles, and yours popped up in our investigation. Can you show us your conversation history?" I handed them my phone, and they scrolled through my messages with Sarah. Detective Chen pointed at something on the screen. "I'll see this. She asked you to meet at this specific coffee shop, right? This is the same location pattern. It's always somewhere public first, to seem legitimate. Then she or he, we're not sure, suggests moving to a second location. Something more private." I thought back to our last few messages. Sarah had mentioned maybe grabbing dinner after coffee if things went well, at a restaurant she knew nearby. She'd even suggested we could walk there together. Did she mention a specific restaurant, Detective Ramirez asked. Yeah, something called. I think it was Rosario's. The detectives exchanged glances. Detective Chen nodded. That's the one. It's a real restaurant, but there's an alley between here and there. That's where two of the victims were attacked. I felt sick. I'd been so close to walking right into a trap. They took my full statement, copied all my messages with Sarah, and gave me a card with a case number. They told me to contact them immediately if Sarah, or whoever it was, tried to reach out again. They also warned me not to engage if she did. I went home that afternoon feeling paranoid and violated. I deleted all my dating apps and tried to forget about the whole thing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd narrowly escaped something terrible. A week went by. Then two. I started to relax, thinking it was over. The police had my information. They were investigating, and I was safe. Then, 3 weeks after the coffee shop incident, I came home from work on a Wednesday evening. I lived in a small house I'd bought after the divorce, in a quiet neighborhood in Lakewood. I pulled into my driveway, grabbed my laptop bag from the passenger seat, and headed to my front door. That's when I noticed it. A small envelope tucked halfway under my doormat. No postage, no address. Just my name, Marcus, written in neat, feminine handwriting. My heart started pounding. I looked around my neighborhood. Mrs. Patterson was watering her garden 2 houses down. A kid was riding his bike in circles in a cul-de-sac. Everything looked normal. I picked up the envelope with shaking hands and went inside, locking the door behind me. I turned on every light in the house before I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was me, sitting in that coffee shop 3 weeks ago, waiting for Sarah. I was looking down at my phone, coffee cup in front of me. The angle suggested whoever took it had been standing outside on the sidewalk, photographing me through the window. On the back, written in the same handwriting, "You were so patient." I appreciate that in a man. S. I immediately called Detective Ramirez. She and Detective Chen came to my house within the hour. They bagged the envelope and photograph as evidence, and their faces were grim. "This is an escalation," Detective Ramirez said. "Up until now, this person has operated entirely online and in public spaces. They've never made contact with a target after a failed meeting, and they've certainly never gone to someone's home." "What does that mean?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "It means you need to be very careful, Mr. Thompson. This person knows where you live. They arranged for increased police patrols in my neighborhood and suggested I stay with friends or family for a few days. But I was stubborn. This was my house, damn it. I wasn't going to be chased out of my own home by some creep. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. The house settling, the wind rattling the windows, the refrigerator humming, everything felt threatening. I kept my phone on the nightstand, 911 already dialed, my finger hovering over the call button. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it. A soft scraping sound, like metal on metal. It was coming from downstairs. I grabbed my phone and a baseball bat I'd put next to my bed and crept to the top of the stairs. The scraping continued, rhythmic and deliberate. It was coming from the back door in my kitchen. Someone was trying to pick the lock. I called 911 in a whisper, giving them my address and telling them someone was breaking in. The dispatcher told me to stay upstairs and lock myself in a room. But I couldn't. I needed to see who this was. I slowly descended the stairs, gripping the bat so hard my knuckles were white. The kitchen was dark, but I could see a shadow moving beyond the curtained window of the back door. The lock was rattling. Then it stopped. The shadow moved away from the door. I stood there in the darkness of my living room, holding my breath, waiting. Silence. Then I heard footsteps on my front porch. They were walking around my house, trying different entry points. The front door handle rattled. I watched it turn slowly, testing to see if it was locked. It was. The shadow moved past the front window, and I caught a glimpse of a figure, average height, wearing dark clothes and a hoodie. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. The figure moved to the side window of my living room, the one right next to where I was standing. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. They were inches away, separated only by drywall and siding. I heard them try the window. Locked. They moved on. The footsteps circled back to the backyard. I heard them trying the basement windows. Each rattled but held firm. I'd checked every lock in the house twice before going to bed, and I was grateful for my paranoia. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard the sound of someone running, crashing through the bushes at the back of my property. 2 police cars arrived within minutes, flooding my yard with light. 4 officers searched the property and the surrounding area, but found no one. They did find scratches on my back door lock and fresh footprints in the garden bed beneath my basement windows. Detective Ramirez showed up 20 minutes later, looking exhausted despite the late hour. "Pack a bag," she said. "You're not staying here tonight." I didn't argue. I stayed with my brother in Colorado Springs for the next 2 weeks. The police stationed an officer at my house, hoping whoever it was would come back. They never did. During that time, they made a break in the case. One of the other victims had saved some metadata from a photo Sarah had sent him. It led them to a real identity, a 34-year-old man named Derek Vaughn who lived in Aurora. He'd been using photos of his ex-girlfriend for the fake profiles, along with pictures of several other women he'd collected from various sources online. When they arrested him, they found detailed files on all his targets in his apartment. Maps, schedules, photographs taken from a distance. There were 12 men total, including me. The file with my name was the thickest. Inside were dozens of photos of me, leaving my house, at work, at the grocery store, at the gym. He'd been following me for weeks, maybe even before we matched on the app. The police found a journal where he'd written detailed notes about each target's routine, habits, and vulnerabilities. But here's what still keeps me up at night. In the entry about me, dated the day before he tried to break into my house, he'd written, "Marcus is different from the others. He's careful, smart. This one will be more satisfying. He deserves special attention." Detective Ramirez told me that Derek Vaughn had graduated from robbery to something more sinister. In his apartment, they found zip ties, duct tape, sedatives, and a taser. They also found video equipment and a laptop with an encrypted hard drive they were still trying to access. "We think he was escalating," she explained when we met for coffee a month later at, ironically, the same coffee shop where this all started. The robberies were practice. He was working up to something worse. "Kidnapping?" I asked, though I didn't really want to hear the answer. She nodded, "Or worse. We may never know exactly what he was planning, but based on what we found, you're lucky, Marcus. Very lucky. Derek Vaughn is awaiting trial now. I'll have to testify eventually. I've moved to a different house in a different neighborhood, and I haven't been on a dating app since. My friends keep telling me I need to get back out there, that I can't let one psycho ruin everything. But sometimes, late at night, I think about those photos in his apartment. I think about him watching me, studying me, choosing me for reasons I'll never fully understand. I think about that message on the back of the photograph. You were so patient. And I wonder how many times he'd been watching before I even knew Sarah Mitchell existed. How many times had he stood outside my house in the dark? How many photos did he delete before the police seized his hard drive? What was on the encrypted files they couldn't access? I used to like living alone. I used to enjoy the quiet and the independence. Now I have a security system with cameras covering every angle of my property. I have motion sensor lights. I have Detective Ramirez's number on speed dial. And I never, ever sit near windows in coffee shops anymore. People ask me if I'm afraid he'll get out someday, if he'll come looking for me. Honestly, that's not what scares me the most. What terrifies me is simpler than that. It's the knowledge that for weeks, maybe months, someone was watching me live my life, documenting my every move, making plans for me that I knew nothing about. It's the loss of that invisible safety we all assume we have, the belief that we'd know if we were being hunted. Because the truth is, we don't know. We can't know. We go about our days thinking we're safe, that we'd feel it if someone was watching, that we'd sense danger before it arrived at our doorstep. But we wouldn't. I didn't. And that's the thought that keeps me awake at night, long after Derek Vaughn is behind bars, long after I've changed all my locks and installed all my cameras. Somewhere out there, right now, someone else is swiping through profiles, matching with someone who seems perfect, making plans to meet at a coffee shop. And they have no idea that someone is already watching them, already taking photos, already writing their name at the top of a new page in a journal. They think they're safe. I thought I was safe too. Story 2 comes from Jennifer Hayes, Portland, Oregon. I was 23 years old when it happened, back in the fall of 2019. My parents had decided to take their first real vacation in 15 years, a 2-week cruise through the Mediterranean. They'd been planning it for months, and I was genuinely happy for them. They deserved it. The only issue was what to do about the house. They lived in a quiet suburb outside Portland, in the same house they'd bought when I was 5 years old. It wasn't anything fancy, just a regular 3-bedroom ranch-style home with a big backyard and a basement my dad had converted into his workshop. My mom was worried about leaving it empty for 2 weeks. There had been some break-ins in neighboring communities, and she'd read too many news articles about burglaries targeting homes where the owners were clearly away on vacation. So she asked if I'd be willing to house sit. I was living in a cramped studio apartment in downtown Portland at the time, sharing a bathroom with questionable plumbing and a kitchen the size of a closet. The idea of having an entire house to myself for 2 weeks sounded like paradise. I could do my laundry for free, raid their fully stocked fridge, sleep in a real bed instead of my futon, and maybe even get some work done without my neighbors blasting music until 3 in the morning. Of course I'll stay, I told her. It'll be like a vacation for me too. My dad spent an hour before they left showing me how everything worked, even though I'd lived there for 18 years and knew the place inside and out. Where the spare keys were hidden, how to work the thermostat, which garbage disposal switch was which, how to reset the breaker if it tripped. And Jennifer, my mom said as they were loading their suitcases into the car, the security system. Please use it. Arm it every night before bed and whenever you leave the house. I will, Mom. I promise. The code is still your birthday, okay? 1215. I hugged them both goodbye and watched them drive away, already planning my 2 weeks of freedom. I was working remotely for a marketing startup at the time, so I could do my job from anywhere. I set up my laptop at the kitchen table, made myself comfortable, and settled in. The first few days were wonderful. I cooked actual meals instead of surviving on ramen and takeout. I took long baths. I watched movies on their big TV. I even invited my best friend, Rachel, over for dinner one night. It was exactly the break I needed. But on the fourth night, something changed. I was in bed around 11:30, scrolling through my phone before going to sleep. The house was quiet except for the usual sounds: the refrigerator humming, the heating system clicking on and off, the occasional creak of the house settling. Then I heard something else. 3 distinct knocks on the front door. I froze, phone still in my hand. It was late for someone to be knocking. I waited, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. 3 more knocks, louder this time. I got out of bed and put on my robe. My parents' bedroom was at the front of the house, and from the window I could see part of the porch and the driveway. I peeked through the curtains. There was no car in the driveway. No one visible on the porch, though the angle was limited. The motion sensor light that usually came on when someone approached the front door was off. The knocking came again, and this time I realized it wasn't coming from the front door. It was coming from the back door off the kitchen. My heart started pounding. I crept out of the bedroom and down the hallway. The kitchen was dark, and I could see the back door from where I stood. Through the small window at the top of the door, I saw nothing but darkness. I stood there for a full minute, barely breathing, waiting. No more knocks came. Maybe it was a branch hitting the door. We had a large oak tree in the backyard, though I couldn't remember it ever reaching the house. I checked that the back door was locked. It was, and went back to bed. But I couldn't sleep. Every sound seemed amplified. I kept thinking about those knocks, how deliberate they'd been. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. That wasn't a branch. That was a pattern. That was intentional. Around 1 in the morning, I finally drifted off. I woke up the next morning feeling foolish. It was probably nothing, I told myself. Maybe a neighbor's cat, or something falling from the tree. I made coffee and tried to focus on work, but I couldn't concentrate. That afternoon, I decided to check the backyard. I walked around the house, examining the back door from outside. There were no branches close enough to hit it. The oak tree was a good 10 feet away. Then I noticed something in the flower bed beneath the kitchen window. Footprints, fresh ones pressed into the soft soil. They were large, definitely bigger than mine. Someone had been standing there, right beneath the window. I felt my skin prickle. The kitchen window looked directly into the house. You could see the table where I'd been working, the living room beyond it, everything. I called Rachel. Maybe it was a delivery person, she suggested, or someone from the neighborhood checking if anyone was home. At midnight. And why would they go to the back of the house? I don't know, Jens. But you're probably overthinking it. Did you set the alarm last night? I hadn't. My mom had made me promise, but I'd forgotten. The truth was, I'd never felt unsafe in that house. It had been my home my entire childhood. Setting an alarm had seemed unnecessary. Set it tonight, Rachel said firmly, and if anything else happens, call the police. Don't try to investigate by yourself. That night, I made sure to set the alarm before bed. I checked every door and window twice. I even put a chair against the back door for extra measure, though the alarm would go off if anyone tried to open it. I fell asleep with my phone on the nightstand, 911 already dialed and ready to call with one touch. Nothing happened that night, or the next. By the 3rd night, I was starting to relax again. Maybe it had been nothing. Maybe those footprints were old, from a utility worker or someone reading the meter. On the seventh night, my mom called from somewhere in Greece. The connection was bad, breaking up every few seconds. How's everything? House okay? Everything's fine, Mom. Having a great time. How's the cruise? It's wonderful. Your father's sunburned, of course, but we're a great time. We chatted for a few more minutes before the call dropped. I smiled, happy they were enjoying themselves. I made dinner, watched some TV, and headed to bed around 10:30. I set the alarm like I had been doing. Code 1215. The panel beeped twice and the red light came on. Armed. I was in that state between sleeping and waking, probably around midnight, when the alarm started blaring. The sound was deafening, a shrieking siren that sent me bolt upright in bed. My heart was hammering as I grabbed my phone and ran to the hallway. The alarm panel was in the kitchen, and I needed to check which zone had been triggered. I flipped on the lights as I ran. The panel showed basement door. We had a basement door that opened to the outside, with concrete steps leading down to it. My dad used it to bring tools and equipment in and out of his workshop. I hadn't even thought to check it when I was locking up. The alarm was still screaming. I pulled up the security company's app on my phone. My parents had given me access before they left. I could see they'd already been notified and were calling me, but I silenced my phone. I needed to think. The app showed the basement door had opened at 12:03 a.m. It was now 12:04. That meant someone had opened it less than a minute ago. And then I realized something that made my blood run cold. The alarm had started blaring the moment the door opened. If someone had triggered it, they would have run. They wouldn't have stuck around with that siren screaming. But I hadn't heard anyone running. I hadn't heard a car start. I hadn't heard anything except the alarm, which meant they might still be in the basement. I should have run. I should have grabbed my keys and gotten the hell out of that house. But something, maybe shock, maybe denial, made me walk to the basement door in the kitchen instead. It was closed. I pressed my ear against it, trying to hear anything over the alarm. Then I remembered I could turn the alarm off from the app. I did, and the house fell into sudden, oppressive silence. I stood there, ear pressed to the door, and listened. At first, nothing. Then, so faint I almost missed it, a creaking sound. The wooden stairs leading down to the basement. Someone was on those stairs. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my phone. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's in my house, I whispered. They're in the basement. I'm at 4782 Maple Grove Road. Are you safe? Can you get out of the house? I think so. The front door. That's when the basement door handle started to turn. I watched it rotate slowly, deliberately. The door was locked. I'd heard the click when I closed it earlier, but someone was trying it anyway. Testing it. They're trying to come up, I said into the phone, my voice barely working. Oh God, they're trying to come upstairs. Ma'am, I need you to leave the house right now. Officers are 3 minutes away. Get out of the house. The handle stopped turning. I stared at that door, frozen. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop, footsteps retreating down the stairs. Not running. Walking. Slow and measured, like whoever it was had all the time in the world. Ma'am, are you still there? They're going back downstairs, I whispered. You need to leave now. That broke the spell. I ran to the front door, fumbled with the locks, and got outside. I didn't stop running until I was in the middle of the street, under a streetlight, where I could see in all directions. 2 police cars arrived within minutes, lights flashing. I told them everything: the alarm, the basement door, the footsteps. 4 officers approached the house with their weapons drawn, while 2 more stayed with me. They cleared the main floor first, then prepared to go down to the basement. I heard one of them shout, "Police! Come out with your hands up." Silence. They descended into the basement. I waited in the back of a police car, wrapped in a blanket someone had given me, shaking uncontrollably. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, one of the officers came back to talk to me. His face was grim. "Miss Hayes, we need to ask you some questions. Did you find them? Who was it? There's no one in the house now. But we found something in the basement you need to know about." He led me back inside, but only to the kitchen. He didn't take me downstairs, and I was grateful for that. The basement door that triggered the alarm, it was locked from the inside when we got here. The deadbolt was engaged. That's impossible. The alarm said it opened. It did open. But here's the thing. That door can't be deadbolted from the outside. It's an old-style lock. Someone would have to be inside the basement to lock it. My mind was reeling, so they locked themselves in. Or they were already in there before you set the alarm, and they tried to leave, which triggered it. Then they locked themselves back in when they heard you coming. But you said there's no one down there. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. That's what we need to figure out. Can you tell me when you last went down to the basement? I thought about it. I haven't. Not since I got here a week ago. I haven't had any reason to. And your parents? When did they leave? 8 days ago. The officers went back down to the basement. I heard them talking in low voices, moving things around. When they came back up, the lead officer's expression was even more serious. "Miss Hayes, there's evidence that someone has been living in your basement." The words didn't make sense at first. Living in the basement. We found a sleeping bag set up behind some storage boxes in the corner. There are food wrappers, water bottles, and other items that suggest someone's been staying down there for at least several days. I felt like I might throw up. Someone's been living in my house. While I was here. It appears so. The workshop area, your father's space, it's relatively hidden from the stairway. There are boxes and equipment creating a sort of blind spot. Someone could have been staying there without being noticed, especially if you never went down there. But how did they get in? And where are they now? That's when the other officer spoke up. There's a window well on the far side of the basement. The window's been jimmied open. It's small, but someone could squeeze through. We think that's how they've been entering and exiting. They've been coming and going. The amount of trash down there suggests they've been here a while, but not continuously. They probably leave during the day when you're here and active, then come back at night. My legs gave out. An officer caught me and helped me to a chair. Tonight, the lead officer continued, we think they were down there when you set the alarm. They probably waited until they thought you were asleep, then tried to leave through the basement door instead of the window. That's what triggered the alarm. When they realized they'd been caught, they went back down, probably escaped through the window while we were clearing the main floor. The next few hours were a blur. More officers arrived. They photographed everything in the basement. They took the sleeping bag, the trash, everything as evidence. They dusted for fingerprints. In the corner where the sleeping bag had been, behind some of my dad's old camping equipment, they found something else, photographs. Dozens of them printed on regular paper. They were pictures of me. Me working at the kitchen table. Me making coffee in the morning. Me watching TV on the couch. Me in my pajamas, walking down the hallway. All taken from inside the house, from different angles over several days. One of the officers handed me a card for a victim's advocate. Another talked to me about getting the locks changed, installing better security, maybe staying somewhere else. But I couldn't process any of it. All I could think about was those photographs. Someone had been in the house with me, every day watching me, photographing me. When I thought I was alone, I wasn't. When I was sleeping, they were awake, maybe standing at the top of the basement stairs, listening. They never found who it was. Despite the fingerprints, despite the evidence, there were no matches in the system. The photos had been taken with a phone or digital camera, printed at home, untraceable. The window well showed signs of repeated use, but there were no clear footprints, no DNA evidence that led anywhere. My parents came home 3 days early, cutting their cruise short. My mom cried when she saw me. My dad went down to the basement with a police escort and just stood there, staring at the corner where someone had been sleeping. We changed all the locks. We put bars on the basement windows. We installed a more sophisticated alarm system with motion sensors on every floor. But here's what haunts me. The police estimated, based on the evidence, that whoever it was had been there for at least 5 days before the alarm went off. 5 days of me living in that house, thinking I was alone. 5 days of them watching me. I think about the first night when I heard the knocking. 3 knocks on the front door, then 3 on the back. Had they been checking to see if I'd come investigate? Testing my responses. I think about the footprints under the kitchen window. Had they been watching me work before they even moved into the basement? And I think about something one of the officers said to me before he left that night. Miss Hayes, the sleeping bag was set up facing the stairs. Whoever was down there, they positioned themselves so they could see if anyone was coming down. They were careful, organized. This wasn't random. I never house sat for my parents again. I couldn't. Even now, 4 years later, I can't be alone in that house. When I visit, I make sure someone else is there. I don't go into the basement, ever. My parents tried to make me feel better. They said it was probably just some homeless person looking for a warm place to sleep, that I was never in any real danger. But I know that's not true. Homeless people don't break into occupied homes and live there for days without being noticed. They don't take dozens of photographs of the person living upstairs. They don't carefully arrange a sleeping bag to watch the stairs. Whoever was in that basement was there for a specific reason. They chose that house. They chose that time. Maybe they'd been watching my parents, waiting for them to leave. Maybe they'd been watching me. I'll never know. But sometimes, late at night in my apartment, I think about those footsteps I heard retreating down the stairs. How calm they sounded. How unhurried. Like whoever it was knew they had all the time in the world. Like they weren't worried about being caught because they'd done this before. And that's what terrifies me most. The thought that somewhere out there, right now, someone else might be house-sitting for their parents, or staying in an Airbnb, or living in their own home, thinking they're alone. But they're not. Someone's in the basement, or the attic, or the crawl space. Someone's waiting for the lights to go out. Someone's taking photographs. And they have no idea. Just like I didn't. Story 3 comes from Rachel Cordova, Austin, Texas. Finding my first apartment after college felt like the ultimate achievement. I'd landed a decent job as a graphic designer at a small agency in Austin. And after months of living with 2 roommates in a cramped 2-bedroom situation, I'd finally saved enough to get my own place. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom on the second floor of an older building in South Austin, but it was mine. All mine. This was 5 years ago, in the summer of 2020, right when everything was still weird from the pandemic. A lot of people were leaving the city, moving back home or finding cheaper places, which meant landlords were actually negotiating. I found the apartment listed online for $950 a month, which was a steal for Austin. The building was from the 70s, kind of rundown, but the landlord, an older guy named Bill Hutchins, seemed decent enough. He'd owned the building for 30 years and lived in one of the ground floor units himself. "You'll love it here," he told me during the walkthrough. "Quiet building. Most folks keep to themselves. Good bones, just need some cosmetic updates." The apartment had wood paneling that screamed 1970s, carpet that had definitely seen better days, and a kitchen with avocado green appliances. But it had high ceilings, big windows, and most importantly, it was affordable and available immediately. I signed the lease that day. Move-in was August 15th. I didn't have much furniture, a bed, a desk, some kitchen stuff, and about 1 million art supplies. My dad and my brother helped me carry everything up the stairs, and by evening I was officially moved in. "You sure you're going to be okay here by yourself?" my dad asked, looking around the empty apartment with concern. "Dad, I'm 23. I'll be fine." He hugged me anyway. "Lock your door. And call your mothers." After they left, I spent the evening unpacking and arranging my limited furniture. The building was quiet, just like Bill had promised. I could hear some muffled TV sounds from the apartment below me, but otherwise it was peaceful. I went to bed that first night excited about my new independence. My own space, my own rules, my own life finally beginning. I woke up around 3 in the morning to a strange sound. It was a scratching noise, rhythmic and persistent. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch, scratch. I lay in bed, listening. It seemed to be coming from inside the wall near my headboard. My first thought was mice or rats. Old building, probably had some pests. I'd mention it to Bill in the morning. The scratching continued for maybe 5 more minutes, then stopped. I fell back asleep. The next morning, I knocked on Bill's door and told him about the noise. "Probably squirrels in the walls," he said, not seeming particularly concerned. "These old buildings, you know. I'll set some traps in the attic space. I should take care of it." I went to work, came home, made dinner, and started setting up my art supplies. I was a digital artist, but I also liked to paint and draw traditionally. I'd set up my desk near the big window in the living room where the light was best. That night, the scratching came back. Same time, around 3 in the morning. Same location, the wall behind my bed. I tried to ignore it, pulling my pillow over my head, but it was too persistent. After about 10 minutes, it stopped again. This pattern continued for a week. Every night around 3 a.m., the scratching would start and last for 10 to 15 minutes. I mentioned it to Bill twice more, and he kept assuring me he was working on it, that he'd set traps, that these things took time. On the 8th night, something changed. I woke up to the scratching, as usual. But this time, it was moving. It started behind my headboard, then slowly traveled along the wall toward the corner of my bedroom. I sat up in bed, watching the wall like I could somehow see through it. The scratching moved from the bedroom wall to the wall, adjoining the living room. Then it stopped at what I realized was directly behind my closet. And then I heard something that made my skin crawl, a soft thump, like something dropping inside my closet. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. My bedroom door was open, and from my bed I could see part of the living room. The closet door, I'd left it open earlier when I was hanging up some clothes, was now closed. I sat frozen in bed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. I hadn't closed that closet door. I was sure of it. For a long time I just sat there, phone flashlight pointing at my bedroom door, waiting for, I don't know what. Some part of me knew I should check the closet, but a stronger part of me was absolutely terrified of what I might find. Finally, as dawn started breaking and gray light filtered through the windows, I worked up the courage to get out of bed. I picked up a pair of scissors from my desk, not much of a weapon, but better than nothing, and slowly approached the closet. I stood in front of it for a full minute before I yanked the door open. Nothing. Just my clothes hanging normally, my shoes on the floor, some boxes of art supplies on the shelf. I checked behind the clothes, moved the boxes, even knocked on the back wall. Everything seemed normal, but I knew what I'd heard. Something had fallen inside that closet. I called in sick to work that day and went to Home Depot. I bought door alarms, the kind that make a loud noise if a door is opened, and put one on my front door and one on the closet door. I also bought a motion sensor camera and set it up facing the living room and closet area. That night I barely slept. I kept one eye on my phone, watching the camera feed. Nothing happened. No scratching, no sounds, nothing. The night after that, same thing. Quiet. I started to think maybe I'd scared away whatever it was. A possum, maybe, that had found its way into the walls and then into the closet somehow. I started to relax. Then, on the third night after I'd installed the camera, I woke up to my phone buzzing. The camera had detected motion. I looked at the feed. The video showed my dark living room, illuminated only by the streetlight coming through the window. As I watched, the closet door slowly opened. Not like someone had pushed it open. It opened smoothly, deliberately, just a few inches. Then it stopped. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. The door alarm hadn't gone off. I could see the little sensor on the door frame in the video. It should have been triggered. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. The closet door just stood there, open a few inches, a slice of darkness visible beyond it. Then something moved in that darkness. It was hard to see clearly in the low light, but I saw it, a pale shape moving slowly into view. It looked like a hand. No, not quite. The proportions were wrong. The fingers too long. I was paralyzed in my bed, watching this happen in real time through my phone. I should call the police, I thought. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. The pale thing retreated back into the darkness of the closet. The door slowly closed. Everything went still. I stayed in bed until morning, lights on, scissors in hand, watching the camera feed. Nothing else happened. When the sun came up, I packed a bag and went to my parents' house. I told them there was a maintenance issue with the apartment, that I needed to stay with them for a few days. I couldn't tell them the truth. I wasn't even sure what the truth was. I called Bill from my parents' house. There's something in my apartment, I told him. In the walls or the closet or I don't know. But I have video. Something opened my closet door last night. Rachel, honey, old buildings settle. Doors don't always stay closed. The frame might be warped. I saw something, Bill. In the closet. Moving. There was a long pause. What kind of something? I don't know. Something pale. Like a hand, but wrong. Another pause, longer this time. I'll come check it out today. Can you meet me there? I didn't want to go back to that apartment, but I agreed. Better to go during the day, and better not to go alone. Bill met me at the building at 2 in the afternoon. He brought a flashlight and a crowbar, which somehow made me feel both better and worse. "Let's take a look at this closet," he said. We went upstairs to my apartment. In the daylight with Bill there, everything looked normal. Almost embarrassingly normal. I pulled up the video on my phone and showed him. He watched it twice, his expression hard to read. "Huh," he said finally. "Huh, that's it. Come here. Let me show you something." He led me to the closet and used the crowbar to tap on the back wall. It sounded hollow. He tapped on the side walls, solid. Back wall hollow. This closet backs up to a space between your apartment and the one next door. Old buildings like this, sometimes they have these dead spaces, gaps in the original construction. This whole building is weird architecturally. Been that way since it was built. So something could be in that space. Or maybe. Let's find out. He used the crowbar to pry off the back panel of the closet. It came away easier than I expected, like it had been removed before. Behind it was darkness and a smell that made me gag. Musty, rotten, wrong. Bill shined his flashlight into the gap. It was narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, but it extended up and down, and I could see it ran along the length of the building. "Jesus," Bill muttered, "I never knew this was back here. What is that smell?" He moved the flashlight beam slowly, examining the space. Then the light stopped on something, and Bill went very still. "Rachel, go wait outside." "What? Why? What did you say?" "Just go wait outside. Right now." The tone of his voice scared me more than anything else had. I backed out of the apartment and stood in the hallway. Bill came out a minute later, his face pale. He pulled out his phone. "Yeah, I need police at 2847 South Congress, apartment 204. You need to send someone now." He wouldn't tell me what he'd seen. He just kept saying the police needed to handle it, that I should stay in the hallway, that everything would be okay. 3 police cars arrived within 20 minutes. Officers went into my apartment with Bill. They were in there for over an hour. More people arrived. Someone said they were crime scene investigators. Finally, a detective came to talk to me. Her name was Detective Sarah Morrison, and she had kind eyes but a serious expression. "Oh, Ms. Cordova, I need to ask you some questions. How long have you lived here?" 2 weeks. "Not even. What's going on? What was in there?" "We found remains in the space behind your closet." "Human remains." "We're still assessing the situation, but it appears they've been there for a considerable time." The hallway seemed to tilt. "Human remains." "Like a body." "The remains are skeletal. We'll need to do tests to determine how long they've been there and identify the individual." "But Ms. Cordova, there's something else you need to know." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. It was hard to make out at first. The space was dark, the image grainy. But then I saw it, scratches on the wall. Recent ones, the wood still light-colored, where something had scraped away the dirt and grime. "These marks are fresh," Detective Morrison said, "within the last few weeks. And we found something else." She swiped to another photo. This one showed what looked like a pile of fabric or rags in the corner of the hidden space. "We believe someone has been living in that space. Recently, there are food wrappers, water bottles, and personal items that suggest someone has been accessing this area regularly." My legs gave out. An officer caught me and helped me sit down on the hallway floor. The remains we found are old, years, possibly decades old. But someone has been in there with them. Someone who has access to your closet. The scratching, I whispered, every night around 3 a.m. We're going to need you to give a full statement. And Ms. Cordova, you can't stay here. Not until we've cleared the entire building and determined if there's still an active threat. The next few days were a nightmare. The story hit the local news. Human remains found in South Austin apartment building. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Friends, family, reporters I'd never met asking for interviews. The police investigation revealed that the remains belonged to a woman named Lisa Brennan, who had been reported missing in 1987, 33 years ago. She'd been a resident of the building, living in what was now apartment 206, right next to mine. She'd simply vanished one day, and the case had gone cold. The architectural survey of the building revealed that the space behind the walls had never been properly sealed during construction. Someone had apparently been using it to move through the building unseen for decades. They found evidence of multiple access points, including one in the basement that led outside. But they never found who had been living in those walls recently. Despite fingerprints, despite DNA evidence, despite everything they collected, there were no matches in any database. Whoever had been scratching at my walls, opening my closet door, existing in that dark space just feet from where I slept, they disappeared. Bill Hutchins swore he'd never known about the hidden spaces. The police investigated him thoroughly, but found nothing to suggest he was involved. He sold the building 3 months later to a developer who gutted it completely. I never went back to that apartment. I couldn't. I paid the early termination fee on my lease and moved in with my parents for 2 months while I found a new place. When I did finally get another apartment, it was in a brand new building, all modern construction, no hidden spaces, no walls thick enough to hide anything but insulation. But sometimes, late at night, I still wake up around 3 a.m. And in that space between sleep and waking, I hear it again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. And I think about that pale thing I saw moving in the darkness of my closet. Those fingers that were too long, that hand that wasn't quite right. I think about how the door alarm never went off, which meant whoever opened that door knew how to disconnect it first. Which meant they'd been in my apartment while I was there, while I was awake, learning my security measures. The police theorized that whoever was living in the walls might have been responsible for Lisa Brennan's death in 1987. They thought maybe someone had been using those hidden spaces for decades, moving through the building, watching residents, occasionally escalating to violence. But here's what keeps me up at night. They found evidence that someone had been in those walls recently, my walls, but there was evidence of habitation going back years. Food wrappers from different eras, different styles. Old clothing next to new. Like the space had been used over and over by different people, or for a very long time by the same person. Detective Morrison told me something before the case was officially closed. She said they found journals in that hidden space, dozens of them dating back to the 90s. They were filled with observations about residents, their routines, their habits, their lives. My name was in the most recent one. But there were other names too. Dozens of them. Most had moved away years ago, but 3 others had been reported missing over the decades from that building or nearby ones. 3 other women who had simply vanished. They're still investigating those cases. They might never find answers. I've tried to move on with my life. I'm still a graphic designer, still living in Austin, though I avoid that whole area of South Congress. I've had therapy, lots of it, and most days I'm okay. But I never feel truly safe in any apartment anymore. I check closets obsessively. I can't sleep unless I've verified every wall is solid, every space accounted for. My current boyfriend thinks I'm paranoid, and maybe I am. Because here's what I can't stop thinking about. That apartment was listed as available immediately when I found it. The previous tenant had broken their lease early and moved out suddenly. Bill told me this like it was good news, like it meant I could move in right away. I wonder sometimes if that tenant heard the scratching too. If they saw their closet door open in the night. If they felt like they were being watched through the walls. I wonder how many people lived in that apartment over the years and heard the same sounds I did, saw the same pale hand reaching out from the darkness. And I wonder where that person is now, the one who was living in my walls, who watched me sleep, who opened my closet door and reached into my room with those too long fingers. The police think they left Austin after their hiding spot was discovered. They think they're probably in another city now, another old building, finding new walls to hide in. Sometimes I see people on the street, and I look at their hands. I think about those fingers, how wrong they looked in the darkness. And I wonder if maybe it wasn't the low light that made them seem distorted. Maybe they really were that long, that strange. Maybe some people are just built differently. Built to fit in small spaces where they shouldn't be. Built to exist in the gaps and shadows of other people's lives. Built to watch and wait and scratch at walls in the dead of night. I hope I never see those hands again. But sometimes, in that moment right before I fall asleep, I feel like someone's watching me from inside the walls. And I hear it again, so faint I might be imagining it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Story 4 comes from David Patterson, Seattle, Washington. I matched with Emma on a Thursday afternoon in March, 3 years ago. Her profile caught my attention immediately, not just because she was attractive, but because her bio was actually thoughtful. She quoted Raymond Carver, mentioned she worked as a veterinary technician, and said she was looking for someone who appreciated quiet mornings and good conversation. At 31, after years of meaningless swipes and disappointing first dates, that sounded perfect. We messaged back and forth for about a week. The conversation flowed easily. Books, music, our jobs, life in Seattle. She told me she'd moved to the city 2 years earlier from somewhere in eastern Washington, a small town I'd never heard of. She was renting a studio in Capitol Hill and loved it despite the noise. Want to meet up? She asked after our 5th day of messaging. There's a coffee shop on Broadway I really like. Volunteer Park Cafe. I knew the place. How about Saturday afternoon? 2 o'clock. Perfect. I'll be the one reading Carver. I showed up 10 minutes early, ordered a latte, and sat near the window. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman walked in who matched Emma's photos. Shoulder-length dark hair, bright green eyes, wearing a vintage denim jacket. She smiled when she saw me and walked over. David, Emma, it's great to finally meet you in person. She ordered a tea, and we talked for 2 hours. It was one of those rare dates where everything just worked. We laughed at the same things, had similar views on important topics, and the silences weren't awkward. When the cafe started getting crowded and loud, she suggested we take a walk through Volunteer Park. We walked the trails, talked about our families, our hopes for the future. She told me she'd had her heart broken a few years ago and had been cautious about dating since then. I'm probably too guarded, she admitted as we sat on a bench overlooking the city. But I'm trying to be more open. You seem like someone worth being open with. We went on a second date 3 days later. Dinner at a Thai restaurant in the University District. Then a third date, drinks at a quiet bar in Fremont. By the 4th date, we'd fallen into an easy rhythm. She'd text me good morning. We'd chat throughout the day about nothing in particular. and I'd find myself smiling at my phone like a teenager. After our sixth date, about 3 weeks into knowing each other, Emma invited me back to her place. "It's small," she warned as we climbed the stairs to her third-floor studio, "and I'm still unpacking even after 2 years." She wasn't kidding about it being small. The studio was maybe 300 square feet, with a kitchenette in one corner, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a Murphy bed pulled down from the wall. But she'd made it cozy. Plants on every surface, string lights along the ceiling, bookshelves crammed with paperbacks. We sat on her bed, the only real seating option, and talked until past midnight. She made us tea, showed me her collection of vintage cameras, told me about the small animal hospital where she worked. Everything felt natural, comfortable, right. "I really like you, David," she said as I was getting ready to leave. "I really like you too." We kissed at her door, and I walked back to my car feeling like maybe, finally, I'd found something real. Over the next month, we saw each other 2 or 3 times a week. I met her coworkers at a happy hour. She met my best friend, Jake, and his wife at a dinner party. Everyone liked her. Jake pulled me aside that night and said, "Don't screw this up." "She's great." I wasn't planning to. 2 months into dating, Emma suggested I keep some things at her place. A toothbrush, a change of clothes, the usual relationship progression. I was staying over most weekends anyway, and it made sense. That's when I started noticing little things. Nothing major at first. Just odd coincidences. Like how Emma would mention a book she'd been meaning to read, and I'd tell her I had a copy she could borrow, only to find that exact book already on her shelf a week later. Or how she'd reference a band I'd told her about, claiming she'd been listening to them for years, even though I was pretty sure I'd introduced her to them. I brushed it off. People forget where they hear about things. It wasn't a big deal. But then there were stranger things. One Saturday morning, I woke up in her studio around 7. Emma was still asleep next to me. I got up quietly to make coffee, trying not to wake her. As I was rummaging through her kitchenette for the coffee filters, I knocked over a stack of mail on the tiny counter. As I picked it up, I noticed something odd. All the mail was addressed to Emma, but the last name was different than what she'd told me. The envelope said Emma Vanderwall, but she'd told me her last name was Sutton. I stared at the mail for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. Maybe she'd changed her name. Or maybe she was using a different name for privacy reasons. I'd heard of women doing that for safety when dating. When she woke up, I asked her about it casually. "Hey, I accidentally knocked over your mail. I noticed it says Vanderwall, but I thought your last name was Sutton." She barely blinked. "Oh, Sutton's my middle name. I go by it sometimes because Vanderwall's such a mouthful. Sorry, I should have mentioned it." It seemed reasonable enough. I let it go. But a week later, I was at her place again, and she was in the shower. Her phone was on the nightstand, and it buzzed with a text. I wasn't trying to snoop. The screen lit up, and I glanced over reflexively. The text was from someone named M, and it said, "Did you tell him yet?" I stared at that message, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "Tell me what?" When Emma came out of the bathroom, I asked her about it. "Your phone buzzed. Someone named M asking if you told me something." Her expression flickered just for a second before she smiled. "Oh, that's my sister, Michelle. I told her I was thinking of introducing you to my family soon. She's excited to meet you. You have a sister. You never mentioned her." "Haven't I?" "Yeah, Michelle. She lives in Spokane. We're not super close, but we text sometimes." It should have been fine, but something in the way she said it felt off. like she was trying too hard to sound casual. I started paying more attention after that. Little inconsistencies in her stories. She told me early on that she was an only child. I was almost certain of it. Now she had a sister, and there were other things. She'd mentioned growing up on a farm, but then later talked about her childhood home being in a subdivision. She said her father was a mechanic, then mentioned him being a teacher. When I gently pointed out these contradictions, she always had explanations. I must have misspoken, or you misheard me, or I thought I told you the full story. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was just looking for problems because things were going too well. That's what I told myself. Then about 3 months into our relationship, I found the box. I was at Emma's studio alone. She'd given me a key a few weeks earlier, and I'd stopped by to drop off some groceries. She'd texted that she was working a double shift and would be home late. I let myself in, put the groceries away, and decided to tidy up a bit as a surprise. I was organizing her bookshelf when I accidentally knocked a stack of books off the top shelf. They tumbled down, and behind where they'd been sitting, I saw a cardboard box pushed back against the wall. I almost left it alone. But one of the books had fallen behind the box, and I needed to reach back there to get it. When I grabbed the book, I accidentally pulled the box forward too. It wasn't sealed. The lid was just resting on top. And when it shifted, something fell out. A photograph. I picked it up and my blood ran cold. It was a picture of me. Not a selfie, not a photo I'd posed for. It was taken from a distance, through what looked like a car window. I was walking down the street, carrying groceries, completely unaware I was being photographed. I recognized the location. It was the street where I lived in Ballard. The photo had been taken outside my apartment building. With shaking hands, I opened the box fully. Inside were more photographs. Dozens of them. Me leaving my apartment. Me at work, visible through my office window. Me at the gym. Me at the grocery store. Me sitting in my car. And they weren't recent. Based on what I was wearing in some of the photos, they'd been taken months before I even matched with Emma on the dating app. Some looked like they might have been taken as far back as 6 or 7 months ago. Underneath the photos were printouts, screenshots of my social media profiles, including ones I thought were private. Screenshots of my dating app profile before I'd matched with Emma. Articles I'd written for work. Even a copy of a professional bio from my company website. At the bottom of the box was a notebook. I opened it with trembling hands. It was filled with handwritten notes about me. My daily routine, what time I left for work, what gym I went to where I bought coffee. My friends' names and how I knew them. My ex-girlfriend's name and details about our breakup. Places I like to eat, books I'd mentioned wanting to read, bands I listened to. Everything I'd thought Emma and I had discovered about each other organically was written in this notebook. She'd known it all before we ever matched. She'd studied me. The most recent entry was dated 2 days earlier. David seems happy. Getting more comfortable. Need to be careful not to push too fast. He's starting to trust me completely. I felt like I was going to throw up. I took photos of everything with my phone, put the box back exactly as I'd found it, and left the apartment. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just discovered. Emma had been stalking me. For months before we met, she'd been watching me, learning about me, building a profile. Then she'd created a dating app profile designed specifically to appeal to me. The Raymond Carver quote, the interests that aligned perfectly with mine, everything. Our entire relationship was manufactured. I called Jake. You need to go to the police, he said immediately after I told him everything. Right now. That's not normal dating behavior, David. That's stalking. That's Jesus. I don't even know what to call it. But it's not okay. But she hasn't actually done anything illegal, has she? Taking photos in public isn't a crime. The breaking and entering might be. How do you think she got screenshots of your private social media accounts? And some of those photos, you said one was taken through your office window. That building requires a keycard to access. He was right. I went to the police station and filed a report. The detective I spoke with, Detective Raymond Walsh, took it seriously. He looked through the photos I'd taken of Emma's box and agreed it was concerning. We'll investigate, he said, but Mr. Patterson, I need to ask, has she threatened you? Has she tried to harm you or prevent you from leaving the relationship? No, nothing like that. Up until I found this box, I thought we had a normal relationship. That makes it complicated. What she's done is definitely concerning, possibly criminal depending on how she obtained some of this information. But without direct threats or attempts to harm you, we're limited in what we can do immediately. I'd advise you to end the relationship and cut off all contact. Don't go to her apartment again. Block her number and social media. If she continues to contact you or follow you after you've made it clear you want no contact, that's harassment, and we can take action. I left the police station feeling frustrated, but knowing he was right. I needed to end this. I called Emma that evening. I didn't mention the box. I just told her things weren't working out, that I didn't think we were compatible long-term, that I needed to end the relationship. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Is this because of something specific? She finally asked. Her voice was calm, almost eerily calm. No, it's just, I don't think it's working. I see. Can we at least talk about this in person? I think I deserve that much. I don't think that's a good idea. Another long pause. Okay. If that's what you want. She hung up. It felt too easy. I blocked her number, blocked her on all social media, and tried to move on with my life. I was hypervigilant for a while, constantly checking if anyone was following me, looking over my shoulder. But weeks passed and nothing happened. No calls from unknown numbers, no unexpected visits, no signs of Emma anywhere. After a month, I started to relax. Maybe she'd just moved on. Maybe it had been strange, but it was over. Then Jake called me at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night, 2 months after I'd ended things with Emma. David, are you home? Yeah, why? Someone broke into my house tonight. Sarah and I just got back from dinner and found the back door forced open. Jesus, is anything stolen? That's the thing. Nothing's stolen. But someone went through our stuff. And David, they left something on our kitchen table. What? A photo of you and me at that dinner party where you introduced us to Emma. Someone circled Emma in red marker and wrote, "She's watching," underneath. My heart stopped. Call the police. Right now. I'm coming over. I drove to Jake's house in Greenwood. 2 police cars were already there when I arrived. Detective Walsh showed up 20 minutes later. I'd called him on my way over. The photo was exactly as Jake described. It was from the dinner party 3 months ago, and someone had circled Emma's face in red marker. The words, "She's watching," were written in block letters across the bottom. This is escalating, Detective Walsh said. Mr. Patterson, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any chance Emma knows where you are right now? I don't think so. I've been careful. What about your phone? Could she have put tracking software on it? I hadn't even thought of that. Detective Walsh had me check my phone. He found 2 apps I didn't recognize, tracking software that had been installed months ago, probably when Emma and I were still dating, and she'd had access to my phone. She's been tracking you this whole time, he said. She knows everywhere you go. They removed the software and advised me to change all my passwords, be vigilant, and consider staying somewhere Emma wouldn't think to look for me. I ended up staying at my parents' house in Tacoma for a week. During that week, Detective Walsh called with an update. They'd gone to Emma's apartment with a warrant. She wasn't there, and according to her landlord, she'd moved out suddenly 3 days earlier, breaking her lease. The apartment was completely empty. No furniture, no books, no plants, nothing. But on the wall where her Murphy bed had been, someone had written something in pencil, barely visible. David, I know you found the box. I know you're trying to run. But you can't run from what we have. I'll find you. I love you, E. The handwriting matched the notebook. They put out a warrant for Emma Vanderwall, but here's the thing. That probably wasn't even her real name. The ID she'd used to rent the apartment was fake. The social security number she'd given her employer at the animal hospital didn't match any records. Emma Sutton, Emma Vanderwall, neither name led anywhere real. The woman I'd been dating for 3 months didn't officially exist. Detective Walsh told me they were working with the FBI because this kind of sophisticated identity fraud suggested Emma, or whoever she really was, had done this before. We're looking into unsolved cases, he said. Missing persons, stalking reports, anything that might match this pattern. 3 weeks after Emma disappeared, they found something. A man in Portland filed a police report 2 years earlier about a woman he'd met on a dating app. She called herself Sarah, had dark hair and green eyes, worked as a nurse. They dated for 4 months before he discovered she'd been stalking him for nearly a year before they matched. He'd broken up with her and she'd vanished. He provided photos. It was Emma. Same face, different name. Then they found another case in Boise, 3 years before that. Different name, Julia, but same MO, same face in the photos. They found 5 cases total, spanning 8 years across 4 states. Every time she picked a man, studied him for months, created an identity designed to appeal to him specifically, dated him until he discovered the truth, then vanished and moved to a new city. None of the other men had been harmed physically, but 2 had been so traumatized they'd moved out of state. One had gotten a restraining order that she'd simply ignored because they couldn't find her to serve her. Another had found evidence she'd broken into his house multiple times while they were dating. The FBI is still looking for her. They've connected her to 2 other possible identities, but she's gone underground. No digital footprint, no paper trail, nothing. Detective Walsh told me that people like Emma, people who create entire false identities to pursue obsessive relationships, are rarer than stalkers, but they're also harder to catch. They're organized, patient, and they know how to disappear. It's been 3 years now. I've moved twice, changed my phone number, locked down every aspect of my online presence. I don't use dating apps anymore. I'm cautious about who I give personal information to. I check my surroundings constantly. But here's what really haunts me. Emma had been watching me for months before we matched. Which means she chose me for a reason. Something about me specifically appealed to her, made her decide I was worth the effort of creating an entire fake identity. I've thought about this constantly. What did she see in me? What made me a target? Was it something in my dating profile, or something she observed while watching me? Was I just convenient, or was there something specific? I'll probably never know. But sometimes, late at night, I think about all the time we spent together. How natural it felt, how perfect she seemed. And I wonder how much of it was real. Did she actually like Raymond Carver, or had she just seen my bookshelf through my apartment window? Did she actually think my jokes were funny, or was she just performing the role of the perfect girlfriend? Were any of the moments we shared genuine, or was I just dating a character she'd created? And here's the worst part, sometimes I miss her. Not the real her, I never knew the real her. But I miss the version of Emma she showed me. The woman who seemed to understand me perfectly, who liked all the same things, who felt like my ideal partner. Of course she seemed perfect. She designed herself to be exactly what I wanted. Jake told me I should think of it like I was dating an algorithm, not a person. She just processed all the data about you and created the output that would get the desired result, he said. It wasn't real. He's right. But that doesn't make it easier. I'm dating someone new now. Her name is actually Michelle. Funny coincidence. She's great and she seems genuine. But I can't help analyzing everything. When she mentions a band I like, I wonder if she already knew I liked them. When she laughs at my jokes, I question if it's real or performed. It's not fair to her, and I know it. I'm seeing a therapist about it. But the paranoia remains. Because Emma's still out there somewhere. Maybe she's moved on to someone else, built a new identity, started the pattern over. Or maybe she's still watching me, waiting for the right moment to reappear. Detective Walsh told me the FBI thinks she might be escalating. The patterns suggest she's spending more time with each target, getting more invested, taking more risks. The case in Portland, the guy was her target for almost 2 years before they actually matched and dated. People like this don't usually stop on their own, Walsh said. Eventually, something's going to go wrong. She's going to push too far with someone or make a mistake, or... He didn't finish that sentence. He didn't have to. I know what he meant. Eventually, being watched and studied might not be enough for her. Eventually, she might want something more permanent. Something the target can't walk away from. I hope I'm wrong. I hope she's moved on, found a new city, a new target, and I'll never hear from her again. But sometimes when I'm walking to my car or sitting in a coffee shop or just living my life, I feel it. That sensation of being watched. And I'll turn around, scanning the faces around me, looking for a woman with dark hair and green eyes who might be wearing a different name today. I never see her, but that doesn't mean she's not there. Story 5 comes from Amanda Mitchell, Phoenix, Arizona. Finding an apartment in Phoenix in the summer of 2018 was harder than I'd anticipated. I just accepted a job as a junior accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, and I needed to find a place quickly. My budget was tight. I was still paying off student loans, so I couldn't afford anything in the nice, newer complexes near work. After 2 weeks of searching, I found a listing on Craigslist that seemed too good to be true. A one-bedroom apartment in central Phoenix for $650 a month. The photos looked decent, a little dated but clean. Hardwood floors, big windows, a small balcony. The building was from the 1960s, but the listing said it had been recently renovated. I called the number in the ad and spoke with the landlord, a man named Terry Westbrook. He had a rough smoker's voice, but seemed friendly enough. Yeah, the place just opened up, he told me. Previous tenant moved out last month. It's a quiet building, mostly young professionals like yourself. When can you come see it? We arranged a showing for that afternoon. The building was a 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but was supposedly up and coming. Terry met me in the parking lot, a heavy-set man in his 60s with a gray beard and a faded Diamondbacks cap. "Apartment 3B, he said, leading me up the exterior stairs. "Top floor. Gets a little hot in the summer even with AC, but the view's nice." The apartment was exactly as advertised. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room with an open kitchen area. The hardwood floors were scuffed but had character. The appliances were old but functional. The walls had been freshly painted white. "I'll take it," I said after a 5-minute walkthrough. Terry seemed pleased. "Great. I'll need first month, last month, and a security deposit. You can move in this weekend if you want." I signed the lease 2 days later and moved in that Saturday with help from my dad and my younger brother, Chris. We hauled my limited furniture up 3 flights of stairs in 105-degree heat. A mattress and box spring, a dresser, a small couch I'd bought off Facebook Marketplace, and about a dozen boxes of kitchen supplies and clothes. "You sure about this neighborhood, Mandy?" my dad asked as we took a water break. He was eyeing the building next door, which had bars on the windows and graffiti on the exterior walls. "It's fine, Dad. It's all I can afford right now. Plus, Terry says they're investing in the area. It's getting better." He didn't look convinced, but he helped me finish moving in. By evening, I was alone in my new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes, exhausted but satisfied. This was my first place living completely alone. No roommates, no family. Just me. I ordered pizza, unpacked the essentials, and went to bed early. I had to work Monday morning, and I wanted to be rested. That first night, I didn't sleep well. The apartment was hot despite the AC running full blast, and the sounds of the city kept me awake. Sirens in the distance, people yelling in the parking lot, bass thumping from someone's car stereo. I'd grown up in a quiet suburb of Scottsdale, and this was an adjustment. Around 2 in the morning, I heard something that made me sit up in bed. Footsteps in the apartment above me, except I was on the top floor. There was no apartment above me. I lay there listening. The footsteps were distinct, slow, deliberate pacing back and forth. They seemed to be directly over my bedroom, moving from one side of the ceiling to the other. After a few minutes, they stopped. I convinced myself I'd imagined it, or maybe the sound was carrying from somewhere else in the building. Old buildings had weird acoustics. I went back to sleep. The next morning, I mentioned it to Terry when he came by to fix a leaky faucet. "Footsteps above you?" he frowned. "That's weird. There's nothing up there but the roof access. Maybe it was pipes or the AC unit. These old buildings make all kinds of noises. Can anyone access the roof?" "Just me. I keep it locked. Sometimes I go up there to check on the AC units or clear debris, but I haven't been up there in weeks." I let it go. Like he said, old buildings made strange noises. But the footsteps came back the next night. And the night after that. Always around 2 in the morning, always the same pattern. Slow, deliberate pacing back and forth across the ceiling above my bedroom. On the 4th night, I grabbed a broom and banged on the ceiling. "Hey, keep it down up there." The footsteps stopped immediately. The silence. Then, after maybe 30 seconds, they started again. Slower this time, more deliberate. Like whatever was making them wanted me to know they heard me. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I knocked on the door of apartment 3A, directly next to mine. An older woman answered, maybe 70, with white hair pulled back in a bun. "Hi, I'm Amanda's. I just moved into 3B. "Oh yes, I heard you moving in." "I'm Dorothy." "Dorothy, this might sound strange, But have you ever heard footsteps coming from above your apartment? Like someone walking around on the roof. Her expression changed. Something flickered across her face. Recognition. Concern. You hear them too, she said quietly. So it's not just me. She glanced behind her into her apartment, then stepped out into the hallway, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. I've lived here for 12 years, she said in a low voice. I've heard those footsteps the entire time. I asked Terry about it years ago, and he gave me the same story he probably gave you. Old building, weird acoustics, nothing to worry about. But you don't believe that. I don't know what to believe. But I'll tell you this, every tenant in 3B hears them. Some people move out after a few weeks. Others stick it out longer. The girl before you lasted about 3 months. Why didn't she renew her lease? Dorothy looked uncomfortable. You should ask Terry about that. She went back into her apartment and closed the door, leaving me standing in the hallway with more questions than answers. I called Terry that afternoon. The previous tenant in 3B, why did she move out? He hesitated. She had some personal issues. Needed to leave town suddenly. What kind of personal issues? I really can't discuss other tenants with you, Amanda. Privacy, you know. Was it because of the footsteps? A longer pause. Look, some people are more sensitive to building noises than others. If it's really bothering you, I can give you some white noise machine recommendations. I want to see the roof. What? You said you have keys to the roof access. I want to see what's up there. He sighed, fine. I'll meet you there tomorrow morning. Terry showed up at 10 the next morning with a large ring of keys. We climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, then continued up a narrower staircase that led to a metal door marked Roof Access, authorized personnel only. Terry unlocked 3 separate locks and pushed the door open. Heat and sunlight flooded in. The roof was flat, covered in white gravel, with several large AC units scattered across it. There was a low wall around the perimeter, maybe 3 feet high. I could see the entire neighborhood from up here. The building next door, the parking lot below, the street stretching out in both directions. I see. Nothing up here but equipment, Terry said. I walked around, examining the space. The gravel showed footprints, lots of them crisscrossing the roof in various directions. Some looked old, almost worn away. Others looked more recent. You said you haven't been up here in weeks, I said, pointing at the prints. Yeah, well, the AC guys come up here sometimes for maintenance. And I might have been up here more recently than I remembered. Why, what are you getting at? I walked to the area directly above where my bedroom would be. There was a path worn in the gravel, back and forth, like someone had paced there repeatedly. The gravel was compacted, and in one spot I could see scratches on the roof surface underneath, like someone had been dragging something heavy. Terry, what's really going on here? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I don't know what you mean. Dorothy said every tenant in my apartment hears footsteps. The girl before me moved out suddenly after 3 months. And there's clearly been someone walking around up here regularly, right above my bedroom. He rubbed his face, suddenly looking exhausted. Okay, look. There might be a homeless guy who sometimes gets up here. I've tried to keep him out, but he's persistent. Picks the lock somehow. I've called the cops a few times, but by the time they show up, he's gone. A homeless guy has been walking around on your roof, directly above where your tenants sleep, and you didn't think to mention this. I didn't want to scare you. And honestly, he's harmless. Probably just looking for a place to sleep where it's safe. I've been trying to handle it quietly. Have you actually seen this person? Well, no. But what else would it be? I stared at him. You're telling me you've never actually seen anyone up here, but you're sure it's a homeless person. What else would it be? He repeated more defensively this time. I didn't have an answer for that. We went back downstairs, and Terry promised to install better locks on the roof access door. But I knew it wouldn't help. Whatever was making those footsteps had been doing it for years, according to Dorothy. Better locks weren't going to stop it. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, waiting for the footsteps. They came at 2:07 a.m., right on schedule. I grabbed my phone and recorded the sound. The pacing was clear on the recording, back and forth, directly overhead. In the morning, I posted in a local Phoenix subreddit, asking if anyone knew anything about my building or had heard similar stories. I got one response that made my skin crawl. I lived in that building 5 years ago. Different apartment, but I heard weird stuff all the time. There's a story that someone died on that roof back in the 80s. The building tried to hush it up. Don't know if it's true, but people talk about it. I did some digging. I went to the public library and searched through old newspaper archives. It took me 3 hours, but I finally found it. A small article from September 1987. Man found dead on Central Phoenix apartment roof. The article was brief. A man named Robert Chen, 34, had been found dead on the roof of an apartment building on Central Avenue. The death was ruled a suicide. He'd been a tenant in the building. The article mentioned that residents had reported hearing disturbances from the roof for several weeks before the body was discovered. The address matched my building. I kept reading. A follow-up article a week later mentioned that Chen's family disputed the suicide ruling. They claimed he'd been afraid of heights and would never have gone onto the roof voluntarily. There were questions about whether someone else might have been involved, but the investigation was eventually closed. Robert Chen had lived in apartment 3B. My apartment. I sat in the library, staring at that article, feeling cold despite the Phoenix heat. The man who had lived in my apartment had died on the roof above it. And ever since then, tenants in 3B had heard footsteps. I should have moved out right then. I should have broken my lease, lost my deposits, and found somewhere else to live. But I was broke, and I just signed a year-long lease. Moving would cost money I didn't have. So I stayed. And I tried to ignore the footsteps. But it got harder to ignore after what happened next. 2 weeks after I found the article about Robert Chen, I came home from work around 6 in the evening. I unlocked my apartment door and immediately knew something was wrong. There was dirt on my floor. Not dust, actual dirt, with small rocks mixed in. It formed a trail from my front door, across the living room, down the hallway, and into my bedroom. I stood frozen in the doorway, my keys still in my hand. The trail looked like someone had walked through my apartment with muddy or dirty shoes. But I lived on the 3rd floor, and my door had been locked. I pulled out my phone, ready to call the police when I noticed something else. The dirt wasn't muddy. It was dry, grainy. It looked like the gravel from the roof. I followed the trail to my bedroom. It led to the center of the room, directly under the spot where I heard the footsteps each night. And there, in a small pile on my floor, was roof gravel. I called Terry immediately. Someone broke into my apartment. What? Are you sure? There's gravel from the roof all over my apartment. Someone tracked it in. That's impossible. I installed new locks on the roof access, just like I promised. And your door was locked, right? Yes, my door was locked. Then how could someone? I don't know, Terry, but someone was in my apartment, and they came from the roof. He came over within 20 minutes. He examined the gravel trail, the locks on my door, no signs of forced entry. The windows all locked from the inside. He couldn't explain it. Maybe you tracked it in yourself, he suggested weakly. I haven't been on the roof since you took me up there 2 weeks ago. He had no answer. He helped me vacuum up the gravel and checked all the locks again. Before he left, he said, Amanda, maybe you should consider. I mean, if you're not comfortable here, I could let you out of the lease early. No penalty. Why would you do that? He wouldn't look at me. Just think about it. After he left, I called my dad. I'm coming to get you, he said immediately after I told him everything. Pack a bag. You can stay with us until you find a new place. Dad, I can't afford to break the lease. Terry just offered to let you out of it. Take the offer, Mandy. Something's not right with that place. He was right. I knew he was right. But something stubborn in me refused to leave. I'd signed a lease. This was my first apartment on my own. I wasn't going to let some weird noises and a pile of gravel chase me away. I'm staying, I told my dad, at least for a while longer. If it gets worse, I'll leave. He tried to argue, but I wouldn't budge. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, waiting for 2 a.m. The footsteps came right on schedule. I sat on my couch, listening to them pace back and forth overhead. But this time, I noticed something I hadn't before. The footsteps weren't just above my bedroom. They were moving. They started above my bedroom, then slowly made their way across the ceiling, following the layout of my apartment. Above the bedroom, then above the hallway, then above the living room where I was sitting. They stopped directly overhead. I stared at the ceiling, barely breathing. Then I heard something new. A scratching sound, like fingernails dragging across concrete. It moved across the ceiling in a slow arc, like someone was reaching down, trying to touch the apartment below. My apartment, trying to touch me. I grabbed my keys and my phone and ran out of the apartment. I drove to my parents' house in Scottsdale and didn't go back for 3 days. When I finally returned, Dorothy was waiting in the hallway. You're going to leave, aren't you? She said. I don't know. Maybe. The girl before you, Stephanie, she lasted longer than most. 3 months. But toward the end, she said it wasn't just footsteps anymore. She said she heard scratching. And she'd find gravel in her apartment, even though her door was always locked. Why are you telling me this now? Because I should have warned you before you moved in. But Terry pays me a discount on my rent to keep quiet about it. I'm on a fixed income. I can't afford to lose this place. What is it, Dorothy? What's making those sounds? She shook her head. I don't know. And I don't want to know. I just keep my head down, mind my own business, and hope it never bothers me. It only bothers people in 3B. As far as I know. That's why Terry has such trouble keeping that apartment rented. He offers below market rates, takes whoever he can get, and hopes they'll stick it out. Most don't make it past a month. I went into my apartment and sat down. I had to make a decision. That night, I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear anything. The apartment was completely silent, and somehow that was worse. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting. The silence felt heavy, oppressive. Like something was waiting too. Around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop looking for me. I sat up, heart racing. I texted back, who is this? No response. I tried calling the number. It rang once, then went to a generic voicemail. I hung up and stared at my phone. Another text came through, same number. I just want to be left alone. I typed Robert Chen. The typing indicator appeared, those 3 dots bouncing. Then stopped. Then started again. This went on for almost a minute before a response came. They said I jumped. I didn't jump. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. What happened? Someone pushed me. I tried to hold on. I scratched at the roof. But they were stronger. Who pushed you? The typing indicator appeared again. Then disappeared. Then appeared. This went on for several minutes. Finally, I can't remember. But I'm still up here. I'm still trying to get back down. Back to my apartment. I just want to go home. Tears were streaming down my face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Can you help me? I don't know how. Find out who did it. Find out why. Then maybe I can stop looking. Maybe I can rest. The messages stopped. I tried texting again, but I got no response. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I got up and started researching Robert Chen. I found his obituary, which listed his family members. His sister, Linda Chenjiao, still lived in Phoenix. I called her that morning. She was understandably suspicious when a stranger called asking about her brother, who died 35 years ago. But when I told her I lived in his old apartment and believed his death wasn't a suicide, she agreed to meet me. We met at a coffee shop near her house in Tempe. Linda was in her late 60s, with gray-streaked hair and intelligent eyes that reminded me of the photo I'd seen of Robert in his obituary. My brother didn't kill himself, she said immediately. Robert was afraid of heights, terrified of them. He wouldn't even go up a ladder. The idea that he went up on that roof voluntarily, let alone jumped off it, is absurd. Did the police investigate it as a potential homicide? They looked into it briefly, but there was no evidence of struggle, no witnesses, nothing to suggest foul play. And Robert lived alone, kept to himself. They couldn't find anyone who would want to hurt him. Did he have any enemies? Anyone he'd had conflicts with? She thought for a moment. There was something with his landlord. Robert had complained about problems with his apartment. Water damage, mold, things that needed to be fixed. The landlord kept putting him off. Robert was thinking about breaking his lease early because of it. Do you remember the landlord's name? Terry something. Terry Westbrook. My blood ran cold. The same landlord I had now. The same landlord who'd owned the building for over 30 years. Linda continued. After Robert died, Terry sold his belongings and kept his security deposit, claiming damage to the apartment. We tried to fight it, but we didn't have the energy after losing Robert. We just wanted it to be over. What if Terry was involved in Robert's death? What if Robert threatened to sue him or report him and Terry did something? Linda stared at me. Do you have any evidence of this? No, but I'm experiencing strange things in that apartment. Things that make me think Robert is still there somehow, still trying to get back to his home. And he sent me a message saying someone pushed him. I showed her the text messages. Her hands trembled as she read them. This is his number, she whispered. This is Robert's phone number. We kept his phone line active for years, hoping. I don't know what we were hoping. We finally let it go about 5 years ago. But I got these messages last night. That's impossible. That number doesn't exist anymore. We sat in silence, trying to make sense of it. I need to find out what really happened, I said, for Robert, so he can rest. Linda nodded slowly. Tell me what you need. Over the next 2 weeks, Linda and I worked together. She gave me access to Robert's personal papers that her family had kept, letters, journals, documents. In them, I found extensive documentation of Robert's complaints about the apartment. Water damage, mold, broken appliances, safety violations. He'd filed multiple complaints with the city, and there were letters from a lawyer about potential legal action. The last entry in his journal was dated 3 days before his death. Terry came by today, angrier than I've ever seen him. Said I was costing him money with all my complaints and lawyer threats. Said I'd regret trying to ruin his business. I told him I just wanted him to fix the problems, but he wouldn't listen. He kept saying I'd pushed him too far. I'm genuinely afraid of what he might do. I took everything to Detective Walsh at the Phoenix Police Department, the same detective I'd filed an initial report with. He listened to my story, looked at the evidence Linda and I had compiled, and agreed to reopen Robert Chen's case. They brought Terry in for questioning. At first, he denied everything. But when they told him they had Robert's journal entries documenting his threats, Terry's story started to fall apart. He eventually admitted to going to Robert's apartment that night in 1987. He said they'd argued, that Robert had threatened to sue him and report him to every housing authority in the state. Terry claimed he just wanted to scare him. I told him to come up to the roof with me, that I'd show him what needed repairs up there, Terry said in his statement. I thought if I could get him up there, show him it wasn't as bad as he claimed, maybe he'd back off. But when they got to the roof, the argument escalated. Robert tried to leave, but Terry blocked his way. They struggled. Terry pushed him. I didn't mean for him to go over the edge, Terry said. It was an accident. But once it happened, I panicked. I staged it to look like a suicide and never told anyone. Terry Westbrook was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. At 72 years old, he'll likely spend the rest of his life in prison. The night after Terry's arrest, I went back to my apartment. I'd been staying with my parents for the past 2 weeks during the investigation. I sat on my couch and waited for 2 a.m. The footsteps came right on schedule. But this time, they were different. Slower, gentler. They paced once across the ceiling above my bedroom, then stopped. I waited, but they didn't start again. Then my phone buzzed. A text from that same impossible number. Thank you. I typed back, are you at peace now? Yes. I can go home now. Where is home? The response took a minute to come. Wherever I was before all this. I don't remember exactly, but I can feel it now. I can finally leave. I'm glad. I'm sorry it took so long. Not your fault. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing. Rest well, Robert. You too, Amanda. You're braver than you know. That was the last message. I tried texting again, but this time the number was truly disconnected. And I never heard the footsteps again. I lived in that apartment for the rest of my lease. Without the nightly footsteps, it was actually pretty nice. The building was eventually sold to a developer who renovated it properly. Linda and I became friends. We still meet for coffee once a month. She says knowing the truth about what happened to Robert, having justice finally served, brought her family closure they'd needed for over 3 decades. As for me, I learned something important during those months. Sometimes the scariest things aren't what goes bump in the night. Sometimes the scariest things are the living people who commit terrible acts and then go on with their lives like nothing happened. Robert Chen wasn't trying to scare me. He was trying to be heard, trying to be remembered, trying to get justice. And in the end, after 35 years of waiting, he finally did. I hope wherever he is now, he's finally at peace.